Well, Microsoft faces the Supreme Court today in a high-stakes case that could affect the online privacy of Americans. Justices began hearing arguments today over a search warrant issued in 2013. U.S. law enforcement ordered Microsoft to hand over the emails of a suspected drug dealer. The emails were stored in a data center in Dublin, Ireland, and the tech giant refused. Microsoft is arguing that the content was outside of the U.S. law enforcement reach, and that this case is framed around digital privacy. The company also said that this is a job for Congress and that they would be the ones working to obtain the information. CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman is here with me on set to break it all down, including the legal implications of this case. Ricky, how did this make its way up to the Supreme Court?
Well, you mentioned it started in 2013 when the government executed a search warrant. The warrant was upheld. And there have been courts, lower courts, which have said, yes, it's fine for the U.S. government to go look for these communications. We wind up in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals reverses. And so that's how we now wind up, even with conflicts, High Court, Second Circuit saying, no, 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 Microsoft wins, lower courts saying the government should win. So we need to find out what the law really is.
So walk us back for a second, first off. How are these emails in question stored in a server in Dublin, Ireland?
Well, it's fascinating, actually, because while Microsoft was more than willing to turn over whatever it had in the U.S. under the valid warrant, but that was data. That wasn't emails, content of emails. Apparently, not only Microsoft, but Yahoo, Google, others, they store their communications all over the world. Yeah. In fact, when you get to the level of Google, they often separate them as they store them. So an email may be in one country and an attachment may be in another. This has nothing to do with anything that's nefarious. It's simply the way it is stored. So these emails are in Dublin, and the U.S. government wants them because they're dealing with a drug trafficking case.
So why do you think it is that U.S. law isn't more specific about this?
Well, U.S. law goes back too far. We go back to 1986. The law in question is called the Stored Communications Act. Let's think about where we were in 1986. We're really before the real advent of the Internet, before the World Wide Web, and certainly decades before the cloud. So what we might have suspected as things went on was that if you went to Microsoft or you went to Google or wherever your emails went, that of course they would all be received and stored within the United States. But now we have the cloud, so they're all over the place. So I do have to say I agree with the concept that regardless of what happens in this case, which is monumental, you have had more than 30 amicus briefs, friends of the court briefs, filed in this case. This is a huge case in the world of technology and law enforcement security. But regardless of what is going to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, Congress needs to do something. And as always, technology is outpacing the law. I want to add one additional factor about the law. We're dealing with Europe. The European Union has one of the strongest privacy preferences. It is considered a fundamental right in the European Union. That is not a fundamental right in the United States of America. We get it from our Fourth Amendment to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. So what Microsoft is also facing, or any other company, is if they go to get these emails in a foreign country, that once this new law in Europe goes into effect in the European Union in May, they could be fined untold amounts of money if they wind up being able to try to seize this. The government says, hey, wait a minute. It's not that you really have to go to Ireland. All you have to do is move that little mouse, and you can take all those emails that are stored in Ireland and you can bring them right back to the U.S. So why can't we have them that way?
Okay.
But the technology companies disagree.
They don't want to do it. So let's say the courts do rule in favor of Microsoft and they say, you know what, you don't get access to this. How does this affect law enforcement, their ability to do terrorism cases and other, this is a drug dealing case. You know, how does that affect how we fight crime, cyber?
Well, it potentially affects it quite a lot because ultimately, criminals are not stupid who are doing sophisticated schemes, be it drug trafficking, terrorism, human trafficking, fraud, that if you know that your emails, your communications that are really done for bad deeds are stored in some other country's server, well, then why would you ever bother to even start them in the United States? We also have another factor here that we can't negate. We're dealing with sovereignty of nations. So if we can reach across the pond to go get someone's emails, what about those other countries who want to reach this way across the pond and get into our emails? Which is why ultimately Microsoft says, hey, wait, you have a way to do this. It's cumbersome, but you can really go under what is called the MLAT, the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. And that's a long, cumbersome process to be able to have two sovereign nations deal with issues of this sort.
You know, the president of Microsoft and the chief legal officer wrote in this blog post saying that he said this isn't a job for the courts, that this is a job for Congress. And what does Microsoft want Congress, you think, at this point to do here?
Well, I think that Microsoft would be fine about turning over that which it controls within the borders of the United States of America. It is not fine with turning over things outside our borders. So what they want is a law that enables them, if they have to do this, to do it legally and not suffer some extraordinary economic damage because of the European privacy principles.
It's a fascinating case. We'll be watching this closely. Who knew about these servers in your emails? Thank you so much, Ricky Cleveland. Appreciate your time.